Hey everyone, it's David Barnett from the investlocalbook.com blog site. This week, our question of the week comes to us from Phil, who asks, how can I determine if the asking price of a business is reasonable or not? And it's a very difficult question for me to answer because there are so many different ways that I can say it depends, or there are certain circumstances that we have to look at. But let me try to address it with some simple sort of guidelines that can help you determine if an asking price is anywhere within some sort of reasonable ballpark or not. The first thing you have to determine is, what are they selling? Because if you're dealing with an unsophisticated seller or someone who's using an intermediary that doesn't know what they're doing, you could end up looking at something for sale which is not purely a business. This would be what we call a recasting exercise. So for example, is it a business but it also includes real estate? Operating businesses and real estate are two very different types of businesses, two different types of assets rather. So somebody could have a business with a free cash flow in your pocket of $100,000 a year, and they might be asking $1 million for that business. And on the surface, that would seem very unreasonable. But if you look under the hood and realize that there's a $750,000 piece of real estate included in that package, then of course that changes everything. And it could in fact be a reasonable asking price, but you then need to try to determine what's the building worth and what's the business now worth based on the business standing alone. So you have to do some recasting or normalization and look at that business outside of the real estate with all of the direct costs that it would normally bear if it was operating as a tenant. In general, what you want to look for is, am I going to be reasonably compensated for the risk that I'm taking in getting into this business? So there's two different measures of cash flow that are often looked at when people are evaluating businesses. And one of them is EBITDA, the earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. In the world of professional business appraisal practice, the EBITDA figure or multiplier is only used when we're talking about businesses with an EBITDA of $500,000 or more. But you find a lot of the times people will use that type of measure for much smaller businesses. And what's interesting about the EBITDA figure is that it's the cash flow after the professional full-time manager has been paid. So you would need to make sure that that cash flow figure actually includes a salary for a manager, and that the manager is being paid a reasonable market rate. So for example, if the owner's paying himself $40,000, but a competent manager in that business should earn $70,000, then you're going to have to adjust that EBITDA figure. And when you look at EBITDAs as a general across-the-board rule of thumb across all industries, which means this is a dangerous thing to look at in a specific instance, but you're generally going to be between maybe 3 up to 5 times that EBITDA figure is going to be somewhere in the realm of reasonable. The other way to look at small businesses is through what we call seller's discretionary earnings, which is the EBITDA figure with the owner's salary added back. So if the EBITDA was $200,000 and the fair market wage of an owner-manager is $70,000, then the seller's discretionary earnings would be $270,000. This is the figure that is more often used in evaluating smaller businesses, because small business buyers tend to look at a business acquisition as a mixture between an investment and buying themselves a job. So that cash flow that goes into their pocket, they look at the whole thing as the return on both their invested capital and their labor together. So when we start looking at seller's discretionary earnings, that figure multiplier could range anywhere from as low as 1 times to as high as 3 times, maybe a tad bit more, with most industries being around the 2.3 area. But again, these are general rules of thumb. If you have a seller's discretionary earnings figure of $100,000 and somebody's asking for $500,000 for the business, what it simply says is that a combination of your labor and capital you're going to take 5 years to get that back. And the problem with small businesses is that it's very difficult to say with any degree of certainty what the conditions of the business are going to be in 5 years, the market, the environment, the economy, etc. And so that's why when you're looking at investing your money and your labor, Most business buyers want to make sure that they can recoup that investment entirely back to themselves within about 2 years, for example. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to pay off the business in 2 years, but it means that they need to get that value back out within that 2-year period. So I hope that gives you some ideas. It can be really dangerous to apply these rules of thumb in a specific instance. So for example, if you went out and you valued a restaurant at the 2.2 times discretionary cash flow, you would actually end up overpaying for the restaurant. It's a very competitive industry, and people in that industry actually end up paying far less because of the risks involved. So I hope that gives you an answer. If you want to really get in and understand how to do this, then I suggest you take my course, which is available at businessbuyeradvantage.com, where we actually work through a step-by-step example with a sample company. We look at the initial financials, we do a normalization, we then do an evaluation of the business, and I explain why the multipliers that are put in place in that example are used and how they make sense. So thanks, and we'll see you next time.
Hey, you made it to the end of the video. That's great. Don't forget, visit www.investlocalbook.com. Sign up for my email list. It's right down here under the welcome video. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.